And we're on. Episode 7 of the NC Squared Conspiracy Podcast. My name is Simon.
My name is Chance.
We're going to get right into it. Today, well, let's start. Let's go back.
Yeah.
Last episode was weird. We talked about 5 proven conspiracies.
Yeah. There's some cool ones in there.
So we shook it up a little bit last week. This week, we're going to go basic because we shook it up last week, so we're going to be basic this week. And we're going to talk about the Roswell Incident.
Indeed.
Before we get into it, though, I'd like to thank everybody that supported us thus far in the production of this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
It's been successful.
Yeah. Is a
word for it.
I mean, that's the best word for it, really.
Yeah, we're having a good time. Hope everyone out there is having a good time. Those people that have supported us on Patreon, they pay for our RSS hosting fees, which is awesome because if we had to pay for that every month, it would be difficult.
It'd be a bummer.
They pay for that. They pay for our beer. They pay for our pizza and or snacks for when we're recording. For those who are interested, today we're drinking Spire Mountain Crisp and Dry Apple Cider. No endorsement, but we're open to it.
You know, if you're out there and you work for Spire Mountain.
And you work for Spire Mountain.
It's handcrafted in the Pacific
cidery?
Northwest.
We're looking for endorsement deals, so hit us up. And we're eating Gardettos, but we know that monster won't
Trust me, I
endorse
can
us.
talk a lot better about things when I'm endorsed.
That's true. Gardettos are great, though.
Gardettos are great. I do that. I always pick out the good stuff first, though.
Definitely.
And then I'm left with a bag of
It's all
shame.
good. It's all good. But it's all good. But anyhow, we're going to get into it. I'm going to start by giving a brief explanation because some people out there don't know what the Roswell Incident
It's amazing, actually, because there's some people that live in Roswell and don't know about it.
People who actually live in the town of Roswell. Some people that are listening probably don't even know that Roswell's a town.
Fair
That's
enough.
possible. But for those of you who didn't know, Roswell is a city in New Mexico. For those who didn't know.
I mean,
And the Roswell Incident, when people say that, actually refers to July 5th, 1947,
yeah.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, mid-1947. I don't remember the exact date, but I think that's right.
I believe it was July 5th, but William Mac Braswell, first name of the day, William Mac Braswell heard an explosion the night before.
That's such
In
awesome.
his own words, he heard an explosion in the night. So then the next day, he goes out onto his ranch. He owns a ranch.
Yeah. I mean, who didn't back then?
Who didn't own a ranch back then? And he finds metal debris.
Yes. I think his description was a thin tinfoil-like with
Lightweight metal debris is what he found, spread over a course of 3/4 of a mile and roughly 100 feet wide. He thinks something of it, but nothing alien of it.
Yeah.
He takes it to town, which I'm told was a 70-mile drive, so he's already putting forth more initiative than most people who find metal on their ranch would put forth.
Yeah. And it was like the next day after he
It was like the next day.
Yeah.
He drives 70 miles to the city of Roswell and gives it to the local sheriff, who then notifies local military base,
Because he couldn't figure out what it
the
was.
Roswell Air Force Base,
Which I believe was the Walker Air Force Base.
Walker Air Force, or Roswell Air Force, or RAF.
Yeah, it's RAAF.
RAAF.
Yeah.
Okay. The Roswell Air Force
Well, that's what the
Base.
newspaper printed off as. So I remember the headline for the newspaper really clearly after all this research. So I just remember it's the RAAF.
Okay, the RAAF.
Not to
We'll say.
nitpick you, just say it.
He notified the base, and they send someone out whose name I do not remember. Do you remember?
I had his name down, but
It doesn't matter.
Keep going by.
It doesn't matter. He goes out to the ranch to check out this metal, and soon thereafter issues a press release stating that he has recovered pieces of a flying saucer, in his own words. Immediately press release to the public that night, actually. It was released. So that is what people refer to as the Roswell Incident. That is when it was first in the papers.
His name was Major Jesse Marcel. And
Marcel,
he accompanied
that's right.
Brazel back to his ranch in plain clothes, nonetheless. Which
Really?
is odd for a military guy, especially around that time during the Cold War. Where
That's true.
So, but he accompanied him in plain clothes to observe what it was that crashed.
Okay, so he goes out, he takes a look at it, and then he determines it is a flying saucer. So in the papers that evening, it is said that they have found parts of a flying saucer on a nearby ranch, and that is what is referred to
As the
as
Roswell
the Roswell Incident. That's what it is.
I mean, pretty straightforward. You see an unidentified object on your ranch. It clearly crashed. And you go to the officials. I think Marcel actually, he didn't know quite what to do at first. He actually reported to higher command headquarters and then released the next day that it was a UFO. So, like,
I thought it was when he then asked somebody else about it. That's when they took it back.
yeah.
I have it in here somewhere. He brought it to the attention of a brigadier general in Fort Wright, Texas. He brings them some of this in a briefcase, some of this material.
Yep.
It said a briefcase, and I'm choosing to believe it. He brought them pieces of a UFO in a briefcase.
Very official.
Then they later make another press release stating that the previous press release saying that it was a UFO was uninformed and is a lie now that he has looked at it closer.
And that's when it's the famous statement of it was a weather balloon.
That is when they said it was a weather balloon.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody from this point on has decided every UFO is, in fact, a weather balloon.
Yeah.
That's where it all started.
That's where it all started.
And that's where the conspiracies started, too, because
It is.
they said it was a UFO, people believed them, and then after that, they changed their mind.
Well, I think the
as
public's
they do.
reaction to it was like insane. So they probably realized they screwed up.
Probably. I imagine it was at the time. UFOs were also a really big deal at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Not just in Roswell, but there was like record numbers of UFO reportings across the world
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah. Which, at the time we were doing the space race and testing new aircraft and stuff. And
This is true. Many things were happening.
a lot of things that people had never seen before.
Exactly. As you mentioned earlier, there was a Air Force base nearby.
Yeah.
The Air Force base, its main purpose was actually test flights of prototype airplanes
Yep.
at the time.
And that was the Walker Air Force Base.
The Walker Air Force Base.
Which, for some of you, now, I am guilty of this. I have always associated Roswell with Area 51. And for some reason in my mind, I always thought they were pretty close. They are not.
Foolish.
Area 51 is northwest, about 83 miles northwest of Las Vegas. Like 900 miles away from Roswell.
Okay.
But whenever you hear Roswell, you think Area 51 and you think the UFO crash. Or at least that's how I've always associated the
I'm sure some other people do as well.
Maybe. But I was just interested in the fact that, like we were saying, the Walker, because Area 51, that's the big thing that everyone said Area 51 was, that disprove or discredit UFOs, is that it was a testing place
Right.
for like new and advanced aircraft.
Sure.
But Walker Air Force was as well. 900
It was
miles away.
at the time.
Like 900 miles is nothing for like airplanes.
Right.
So
Roswell, UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why would there be a UFO in Roswell?
Well, I mean, that's a broad question, and it's tough to answer. To be honest, like, why would UFOs be anywhere near Earth? That really, if they have the ability to traverse such massive distances in our universe, they could observe us quite easily, I imagine, without having to literally get thousands of feet from the ground and like try to make it work.
Sure.
So
I did come across one reason why there could potentially be UFOs at Roswell. At the beginning of World War II, the Roswell Airfield, or Walker Airfield, it housed the 509th Bombardment Group, which was the only atomic air wing in the world at the moment.
Interesting.
UFOs, radiation, nuclear test sites, they seem to be related.
Yeah,
At
I mean,
least in the
especially
stories.
Yeah, especially with such a massive weapon of destruction, and then the fact that if they were going to intervene or observe it, especially with considering it was a brand new technology at the time, practically.
Right.
That would be where you'd want to go, is where they're going to be flying it.
Yeah.
I did hear from another source. Now, I couldn't find it online whatsoever, but another source did tell me in person that something like 8 miles north of Roswell, there was a scientist separate from the military that was testing rockets and shooting them into space. He was actually the first man to send objects into space, supposedly.
I heard about that as well.
And, like I said, I tried and tried and tried looking for any kind of information. I couldn't find anything, no documents, nothing. But it is an interesting concept if there was someone that was doing the same thing with space and shooting basically rockets into the air.
Sure. If someone is going to visit from another planet, they're probably going to be interested in the people that are able to
make it into space,
leave the planet themselves.
Yeah.
Or shooting large, powerful things, hot things, potentially. Mm-hmm. Definitely. If you're looking at a heat map of the Earth and you see these large heat spots,
yeah,
that makes sense.
Especially if it doesn't read out like anything natural.
Sure. So there's a guy near Roswell shooting rockets into the sky, and also at the Roswell airfield, there's nuclear weapons being tested.
Yep.
And airplanes being tested. This seems like an area of interest for aliens.
Yeah, didn't you tell me the first plane to break the sound barrier was out of?
Right, that's why a lot of people are actually... That's where a lot of the conspiracy comes from. People think that the Roswell crash is what gave us the technology that we reverse engineered to get where we are with air and space travel today.
I could see it if it happened.
Because of the time frame, right?
Yeah.
Around that time, it was an important deal.
Yeah, extremely important considering we just got out of the biggest war the world had ever seen.
Right.
So and we were basically trying to beat the Russians in any way possible.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, that makes sense.
So basically it comes down to where the incident could be explained off, or rather, the theories behind it is alien origin craft, and that we reverse engineered the technology and then made leaps and bounds in our technology based off of it.
Yes.
The other theory that's working is a secret military aircraft of some sort that had to crash and stuff. And
right.
That they were just covering it up because they didn't want the Russians to know.
I have a piece of information for that, just a little blurb.
Ooh, yeah,
that doesn't prove one way or the other, but it's an area of interest. A couple months after, I believe it was October of the same year, we broke the sound barrier for the first time. We were supposedly, we were the first people to actually break the sound barrier.
Mm. Yeah, that was the one out of Walker, right?
It was out of Walker. The plane itself was actually dropped from another plane.
Okay.
It's the X-1. You can look up this plane. It's very small.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
At the time, it was dropped from other planes to be launched. I don't remember the dude's name. I was looking at it earlier. But he broke the sound barrier. Chuck Yeager. I just saw it. Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier, which was actually the beginning. It was the beginning of our space program.
Yeah. Once we knew we could beat sound, why couldn't we beat gravity?
Sure. So it was like, well, and also that was key into actually leaving our atmosphere.
Yeah.
But so UFO crashes, that backs up your idea that they were testing things in the area anyhow.
Oh, yeah.
Or also that it was a UFO. Because UFO crashes, and then
a couple months later, we
break the sound barrier for the first time.
We make leaps and bounds in technology.
Right. We achieved something that we were not even sure what was going to happen when we achieved it.
Yeah, there was a lot of theories at the time that
there was a lot of debate.
That people would just die from it.
Exactly. They didn't know. So we did that. People think it was in part due to the fact that we had recovered an alien spacecraft just a couple months earlier.
You know me. I want to believe.
I want to believe. I do. But also, if they were testing supersonic jets in the area and one of them happened to crash in the area,
yeah,
it would make sense that maybe a couple months later they got it right and broke the sound barrier.
Very true.
Maybe this time it didn't take off by itself. They dropped it out of an airplane, and that was the key.
That was the key.
That was the key.
I mean, if you think about 1947, you know, brand new to these new airplanes that are flying in our sky, because before that it was mainly the P-51 Mustang and stuff like that.
Sure.
Like, you know, they were very loud, very noticeable, very slower, like moving airplanes. And then suddenly we started developing rockets,
Right.
breaking sound barriers. Like, that's terrifying to people, and they don't know what it is because it was all so classified at the time.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Well,
like,
not to mention these planes just in design were very forward thinking.
yeah. You know, like
Odd looking.
those concept cars you saw back in the day look very futuristic
Yeah.
and stuff.
These were concept airplanes.
Exactly.
And they were flying them around.
at supersonic speeds.
They did look futuristic. We were actually looking at pictures of the X-1 jet that broke the sound barrier earlier today, and from multiple angles, it looks just like the UFO that people claim to have seen.
It's short, stout, the wings are set up, and the tail fin looks almost exactly like you would.
It could be confusing to people. It had a glass cockpit on it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if
They
people...
painted it orange.
It was bright orange. I'm sure it had some lights and like sensors and stuff on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. So either it's a secret military aircraft, which, fine, you know, I'm okay with that. Like, I get it. Alien, reverse engineer for the technology, or what they claim it actually was, which was Project Mogul.
Mogul.
Yeah.
Walk me through that.
So
Explain
Project Mogul at the time is after everything was said and done and they finally came forward with the weather balloon. After it was declassified, what they say what the Roswell incident actually was is that they were floating these microphones way up in the atmosphere, and it was such a secret project because they were actually measuring the sound to know exactly when Russians were detonating nuclear devices for testing. So they were able to record when they would test them, and
That was the purpose of the project?
basically they would. The whole project was based around that. It was later on it was replaced with seismographs and stuff like that because it was much cheaper, much easier, and but when we first started off with Project Mogul, it was we would put microphones way the heck up there in the atmosphere, and it would detect the sound. And then a very specific sound is created from an atomic blast, and they could register how strong it was and how often the Russians were doing it.
Okay.
So that's what they claim.
When they
the US Air
later
Force,
said it was
a weather
balloon,
It was to protect
that
it.
was their explanation as to what weather balloon it was. They were saying there was a weather balloon right there because of Project Mogul.
Yeah, they didn't admit the Project Mogul till many years later. The U.S. Air Force
Well, they
finally
needed time to come up with a good story.
exactly. Like, it's always easier to explain something away in hindsight
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, because then you have time to think about it.
and to come up with like theories and like reasons.
So it kind of comes down to, do you trust people's immediate response to something, or do you think that...
You mean a lieutenant colonel of the Air Force who says, "Hey, it's a UFO"?
Right. Or do you believe the
Bigger
premeditated words of the government?
Or basically his
Because
boss.
they didn't have anything to say right off the bat.
Basically his boss's boss later saying, "Hey, that was not correct, actually.
That wasn't correct.
Disregard."
Yeah, like, that dude had to lose his job.
Something
The dude
like
that said it was a UFO. They were like, a press release?
Well, it wasn't
You
just...
put out a press release saying that you found a UFO?
What's funny about it is that Roswell Incident, it's considered like the epitome of our first UFO crash kind of situation, where it was publicized.
Notable.
Where it was publicized. And the entire United States heard of it at the time. But what's interesting is that 5 years after that, in 1952, the Air Force opened up its new project, which was Project Blue Book.
Okay.
Its entire purpose from the Air Force perspective was to investigate all UFO sightings, information, anything along the lines, crashed objects, and everything like that. And it was started in 1952, and it was ran by anonymous people who are redacted from the information from the, when they release it for Freedom of Information Acts and stuff like that, they always redact the name so you can't actually pursue those people for interviews of any kind.
Sure.
For the most part. But it was released, they started it in 1952. That's 5 years after Roswell. Now, if I was a government agency, which takes time with red tape and authorization and talking with all the people who are going to be involved, 5 years is not that long for a UFO to crash, them discover, hey, this is a UFO. 5 years of investigation, testing, just basic science on it to figure out what it is.
Right.
5 years later, release a report to someone very important who's not seen in the public at all, who says, okay, now we're going to actually investigate all UFOs so we can gather more information about this one.
Right.
Because if there's more out there, we want to know.
Back around the time that Roswell was happening, there was a ton of UFO reports all over the place.
I think they investigated 12,618 is the official report.
So there was a lot, right? And they weren't paying attention to them back then when they were so frequent. But then in the future, when it had actually died down, that's when they decided to look into it.
Well, not just died down. Like if you, like I was saying, on the side of the alien portion.
Okay.
If you run it, now either one could be logical, but like I said, it would take years to study the aircraft, study the bodies, to understand what you're looking at. What, if any, there is a threat there, if any, or if it's non-threatening, or if there's more of them. That would be the major concern. If you found an alien spacecraft, you're going to want to know, are there more, or are there more coming back for this one?
Right. Sure,
and that would be Project Blue Book. Investigate them, track them, figure out if they're coming back for the parts and bodies that are left here.
Right.
And then,
See, and the only reason we know like anything on the military portion or the government portion of Roswell is because later documents were declassified.
Yep.
Which means they were things that they weren't going to tell us to begin with.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Freedom of Information Act, like that happened, I think, around, later on. And then it ended up being one of those things that I think they it's a lot of senators and people just involved saying, hey, you have all these secrets. If they're old secrets or, they're not a threat to national security, you need to tell us about it.
Right.
Because the government is the people.
Right.
We need to know about it.
See, and people think that they actually do have the right to know everything that's going on, and that's actually not true. You don't have the right to know everything that's going on.
Correct.
Even with the Freedom of Information Act, that does not entitle you to know things that they deem to be a threat.
A threat to national security,
right?
Of any sort, basically. All they'd have to do is label it, saying this is still a threat to national security.
Yeah, no one can argue with that. And you tell them that it is, and they ask why, and you tell them that you don't have to tell them.
Yeah, basically, it's
actually that easy.
That's exactly what they say.
That's exactly what they say.
I don't have to tell you why. It's still a threat.
It's still a threat, exactly.
But for a smart government, it would be better to release a ton of information, such as 12,618 reports.
Right.
Keeping, say, 37 reports that you actually care about and still are national security situations.
Right.
And just releasing such a mass amount of information, no one's going to look deeper or be like, is that all of it? And then when you say, yeah, that's all that concerns you.
Right. And when the Freedom of Information Act was put into place, they actually weren't able to recover documents from that specific time frame.
Correct.
From the Roswell Air Base.
Correct.
They were not able to because they said they had
been destroyed.
They've been destroyed.
Yeah, they didn't even try
Which is a regular occurrence. That comes as a shocker to some people.
Well, like
documents get destroyed
moon
all the time.
landing got destroyed. So
It did.
Footage.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later. But yeah, absolutely. That whole year of records destroyed. And they didn't even try to like fluff it up as saying there was a fire or anything. They just said they were destroyed. Due to not being necessary.
So we have info from beforehand and we have info from afterhand.
Yep.
The beforehand is how we know that there was already prototype airplanes being tested there.
Yep.
The after is just a story that the government gave us afterwards.
Saying, oh,
so
well, we
there were
destroyed
prototype
all the
airplanes, and then they erased the part where something goes down right next to the base. And then after that, they're like, weather balloon.
Weather balloon, guys.
Weather balloon.
Oh, by the way, all records have been destroyed of this year, so don't bother asking.
I feel like people should look up what weather balloons look like, because a lot of people don't know. they can look pretty UFO-y.
Yeah.
So I'm not discrediting the weather balloon theory.
I don't think it was...
There's a lot of people that like claimed to work that weather balloon at the time and said that it could be that.
See, no matter what, I know it wasn't a weather balloon. 100%. I am not concerned about it being a weather balloon. If it's not aliens or a secret military craft, then it has to be the Project Mogul, which was basically a weather balloon, except it wasn't for weather. It was for measuring the atmosphere with a mic.
Right.
So the fact that they said weather balloon, they were still trying to cover up what what it may have actually been, which was just us listening to the Russians.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, like I said, I want to believe it's aliens just because of the leaps and bounds in technology afterwards.
I would love to believe that it's aliens.
There's a lot
because that's ultimately what I'm out looking for.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh,
I want to believe,
and that's something that I want to believe. And one day maybe I'll find evidence.
One day.
One day.
Perhaps.
When I'm 98 years old.
Perhaps.
The other interesting thing about the Project Blue Book is it ran from 1952 to 1969. And the significance of 1969, to me at least, is that Nixon became the president of the United States, like January, that place. Which, he's got his own conspiracy kind of thing going on.
He does.
It's one of those things
There's
where
many episodes to be had on this character.
Exactly, which we will get to those. But the other most significant thing to me, at least, is during that year we had finally made it to the moon. We landed a rover on the moon. It returned to Earth safely.
What year is that? My history.
1969.
Okay.
So we landed a rover like in March, and then it returned, or maybe it was landed earlier, but it returned back to Earth in March. And then later on, Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon in 1969. It's interesting because after he set foot on the moon in 69, I think it was like July or June or something like that. Forgive me, I'm not a history major.
Me either.
But the Project Blue Book then officially ended like in December of 69.
Their work was done.
Yeah. I mean, now I've talked about this theory with Simon a little bit. But my whole theory is, if we're going with the aliens, which I want to believe, we land on the moon. If we find evidence of alien structure, aircraft, or signs of any kind of alien, that would be the first thing they did, is they'd shut down the research for UFOs and then focus the group or resources back into, now that we've found something again.
Something more relevant.
Something
to the time.
Relevant to the time, and a second spaceship per se, or structure.
The big one is structures on the moon.
Exactly.
We've talked about it a little bit.
All that funding, they would shut down the project to research UFO sightings, and then focus that money and time into, now we're going to investigate what we finally found.
That does make sense. Why would you continue investigating the evidence you already have?
Yeah.
When you have new evidence to look at.
Now you have new stuff to look at on the moon, which is the moon landing is its own conspiracy. Then what they found on the moon is its own conspiracy. But I just find it interesting that the timeline lined up like that.
Definitely.
One project that's specific to aliens is shut down as soon as we land on the moon and supposedly found structures on the moon.
That makes sense.
I'm just saying.
So the timeline there, going back to Roswell, we find the UFO. It crashed. They determine it's a UFO.
Yep.
Tell everybody it's a UFO, and then they change their mind and say, well, never mind, it wasn't a UFO. Then they let everybody calm down a little bit.
Which they said supposedly people's fears instantly went away within the year.
Right. Yeah, no, they talked like it was resolved when they said that.
Yeah, as soon as, because people believed, they trusted their government.
It was a trusting
trusted
time.
Their military.
It was a trusting time.
Exactly.
We're no longer in trusting
times. No, we're not.
It seems that nobody trusts anybody right now.
That's because we've been proven wrong so many times and proven right
exactly.
so many times.
So they tell them that it's not a UFO. Everybody calms down, and then a couple of years later, now that everybody's calmed down, they can start looking at it again.
Mm-hmm.
Project Mogul, right?
Well, Blue Book was the investigation. Mogul,
Blue Book. Which one was Mogul?
Mogul was the mics in the atmosphere.
Sorry, they come up with the Mogul story.
Yep.
To justify.
Yep.
So they can look into it. Operation Blue
Which
Book.
Project Blue Book was actually required by a senator to look into the Roswell incident, and they deemed that they found nothing of importance.
Interesting.
Which, again, at the time, I think when they looked into it, it was like 10 years later. So 10 years later,
quite a while later,
all the records were destroyed from 1947. So they're only going off of eyewitness testimonies and stuff.
Yeah, they said they conducted over 2,500 interviews with hundreds of individuals.
Yeah, and when we say the records were destroyed, I mean they couldn't find the original crashed material. They couldn't investigate on the base anything related to it because there was no records.
Papers gone.
Papers are gone. Pictures are gone, other than what was released to the public at the time, which was literally one picture of some tinfoil and some sticks on a ground.
Right. Yeah. it literally.
And and Project Blue Book goes there. All the records are destroyed, so the original aircraft is missing and no longer there. The paper, and then so all they have is eyewitness reports, which they had plenty of people say, yes, I saw a UFO. Yes, I identified.
Well, they also had a handful of people that said they didn't.
Exactly.
So that's the side you're going to go with.
Yeah.
If you're trying to cover it up.
If you're not trying to rock the boat.
Right.
Why would you then go, we believe this guy, not that guy?
Then we get to the moon.
Yeah.
And then Blue Book stops and they quit looking into UFOs again.
Yep.
We're in outer space now. Why would we study things that came from outer space on Earth when we're now in space?
Where we could study them.
Closer, maybe? I
don't know.
Something.
I don't know. Increased...
That's totally believable, though. That's as believable as anything.
Yeah, I mean, we went to the moon quite a few times, and then we suddenly stopped. Just randomly one day they were like, there's nothing we can learn from the moon.
Or they at least stopped talking about it. It was glorified heavily.
Yeah.
And then they stopped talking about it.
Yeah, and then we talked about in the last episode, or not last episode, but
an episode.
An episode.
Yeah.
They said there's nothing to learn from the moon anymore. Now we're going back because we got things to learn about the moon now.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly. We talked about the 2020 space race a little bit.
Yeah.
We could probably make another episode just called the 2020 space race.
It's a huge thing.
And we could get into it a little bit more.
So many parties.
But everybody's
involved.
going back to the moon now. The organization that went to the moon originally included.
Yep.
They're going back.
Good old NASA.
Good old NASA. They got less money now, but they're still going. Well, they have more money, but with inflation and everything, they don't have as much funding as they used to.
And they don't have as much government backing.
SpaceX is where it's at.
SpaceX.
Get your stuff together, NASA.
Jesus, NASA, come on now.
Elon Musk. He's
Just
beating
NASA,
one guy.
NASA, just hire him already.
For real.
That's all he wants.
He's got
just
his
wants
own
to be...
space company that makes more money than NASA. Why would he? They should liquidate NASA into SpaceX, and then maybe we'll get something done.
Something. Oh God.
Because they're planning to go to the moon a little bit late because everybody else is already going back.
Leave it to companies to always beat out government.
Yeah, I know. They like to slow things up.
Even when there's not a ton of profits, they'll find a way to make profits, and then they'll be better than the government.
That's true. And this is yet another story of the government just being shady.
Shady and not efficient.
Not efficient and not official.
Yeah.
They release a press announcement. So this had to pass through multiple ears before it happened.
Absolutely.
And they each determined, yes, tell people we found pieces of a UFO. And then they changed their mind later. I do not doubt. I doubt a little bit. I doubt everything a little bit.
Well, yeah. I mean, a healthy amount of skepticism.
At least at this point in time, right now, at this second, my opinion will probably change at some point. But it seems likely that they could have found something that was a UFO. And by that, I just mean they
unidentified flying object.
Exactly. They didn't know what it was. A UFO.
Doesn't have to be specific to
when people say UFO
alien.
and the government's so fast to shoot down UFOs.
I know.
Why not just say you found something you're not sure where it's from and then later just blame it on Russia?
Well, that's what a UFO was. It became a thing about aliens later, but it was an official term for exactly that. something you didn't know what it is, but it's capable
It's
of
flying.
Yeah, it's capable of flying, and it's scary as hell.
And that is cause for concern.
Yeah.
So you tell people about it.
Yeah, there's pilots even today.
I just
you
don't.
can find
It would
their
have been
video.
easier to just blame it on a country that people didn't like at the time.
Yeah,
If
like
it was-
Russia.
Like, did they not even? I don't know if they are actually hiding something. So, because part of me says, okay, weather balloon, maybe. But like, let's say that is the case. Why? Why? Or if they are choosing to lie, why the weather balloon route when you could just say Russia did it and people would be like, Russia did do it.
You know what? Russia did do it, and we need to stop them.
And we need to stop them. It would have been that easy.
That you know what they say.
That's
Communism
what
was
makes
a
me
red
think
herring.
that, okay, maybe it was a weather balloon, because you wouldn't come up with that as a lie, because that is the worst lie I've ever heard.
It's not a terrible lie if it's like Project Mogul, which looked exactly like a weather balloon. And it also explains any more that people saw. They just assume it was a weather balloon.
That's fair, I guess.
But if it was an alien and you're on the fly, I'd say weather balloon.
Yeah.
Because who's going to disprove you?
That's
You've already
true.
destroyed the records and the objects.
That's true. There's like no pictures even.
There,
So
yeah.
people cannot go.
Well, the
people
guy-
can't go back and look at a picture of it and make their own determination about what it is, because they have like destroyed everything.
Except the one picture that was in the newspaper.
Right. Exactly.
Which was literally a dude in a room holding like aluminum foil and some
Aluminum foil.
sticks.
And there was multiple stories about the material that they recovered as well. Numerous people, I'd say most people, who said they actually had their hands on it. They said that it was as thin as tin foil and it couldn't be dented and it couldn't be bent with your hands.
I've heard that.
And then like a couple other
Weird.
people who I am doubtful of said you could crumple it in your hands and then it would expand back to its original shape.
And see, those are two conflicting terms to me.
Yeah.
One is lying.
The latter
Yeah.
is definitely because
They're just riding a
I'm
bandwagon.
thinking I'm no aerospace engineer.
There is we have talked about material that can do that, but that's like newer stuff. Like,
Right. But like, what would that have to do with something that's flying? Something that could easily be crumpled up but would return to its original position. Whereas something that was extremely light and could not be dented or bent, that would be used for
The
aviation.
practical application of a material that was capable of returning to its original form after being hit, per
Yeah.
se, by, say, micro meteor.
Sure. I see.
If it's,
I get it.
He didn't say it wasn't strong. He just said it would return to its
But
natural form.
if you're traveling at like hella speeds though, and then something hits you traveling at these hella speeds,
Yeah.
the fact that it will slowly return to its original form is not going to help you, because your aerodynamics have been thrown off and you're traveling at over the speed of sound. I'm assuming.
Let's assume.
I'm going to assume because
Let's assume that you're traveling
supposedly
at
they
least.
come from a long ways away.
Yeah.
Some people think they all just come from the moon though,
Ooh.
and they don't actually have to go nearly as fast as we think.
Let's go with the wormhole.
The what? The
Wormhole.
wormhole. Okay, so they
You
just
would need an object that was capable of collapsing down, but then after going through the wormhole,
But what about
coming into
what
its
about the
original.
contents? They would also have to be.
What if they can do it?
What if there was no people in it at all?
What
And
if
they
they-
just sent
Ah.
it?
Or aliens have no bones and they're capable of extreme pressures.
We just don't know. Like octopus. They just like squeeze.
I mean,
them
I
through
always
the-
said octopus were aliens, anyways.
Oh yeah, well they.
I mean,
are.
look at them; they don't resemble like anything,
That's true. That's
and they're
true.
smart as hell.
A bit of an anomaly.
Yeah, and they're smart. They can camouflage themselves. They can solve puzzles and then laugh at you about it.
This episode isn't about octopus.
But-
Octopi. I believe it's called
I think multiple
octopi.
squids, though, they're just dumb.
Are they?
I think so. Squids are
Anybody
like
out there could
jellyfish. They're just
confirm that. I'd like to know.
yeah.
I don't think they are.
Please confirm. I think squids are supposed to be like as dumb as jellyfish. They're just eaters, whereas octopus
They
were
have to-
actually like the
I
smart
have
ones.
some experience with jellyfish. They have got to be smarter than jellyfish. Jellyfish, I don't think they have any cognitive, like, they just float around, literally.
I always was confused. We're getting off subject, but I was always
We're
confused.
getting into aquatic creatures.
I was always
That's a different episode.
I was always confused by the existence of jellyfish, like considering like most animals.
You just
like,
said we were done talking about jellyfish.
all right, we'll get off.
And then you got right back into
It'll
it.
be for the post podcast.
Completely forgot where we were going.
It'll be for
We
the
will
post
bring that
podcast.
up in the podcast that comes after the podcast.
Yeah.
So follow
All
us
right.
to Patreon
So
for that.
later on, I don't remember the year. Speaking back, we got off topic, but I love the topic
I
we
don't
were
even
going
remember
with.
where we were going. We're going to finish that conversation later, though.
We love you guys, and I hope you guys love our random tangents every once in a while, just for a
Hopefully.
minute.
They probably don't.
They probably don't.
We'll get into it.
Getting back to the Project Blue Book, there's a Lieutenant Colonel French who was a disprover of UFOs. He would specifically
Like by
his,
profession.
yeah, like he says he was part of Project Blue Book, but there's no real way to know for sure because those names are redacted.
Right. Okay.
So, but he claims he was. I don't know if he's still alive or not, but he says he was, and his entire purpose was to hunt down UFOs and disprove them. His job was to investigate and disprove if they had no bearing whatsoever. So he went through most of his life, and he said that his entire life he had never encountered a UFO nor saw evidence of a UFO until the Roswell incident. Now, he states that everybody knows of the Roswell incident as the crashed weather balloon situation, but he says there was actually 2 crashes. And that was an interesting thing to me as well.
That is interesting.
He said the first one was actually taken down by an experimental plane that they were using to combat Russian airplanes at the time, and it was flying in the area, and they saw the UFO. This experimental craft had the ability to shoot an EMP cannon that would disable electronics.
There was a radio transmission that was happening during this, wasn't there?
I think so.
In like the pursuit.
I think so, and that's what
There's been many throughout
That's
time.
what Lieutenant Colonel French claims, is that when he went and investigated, he had learned of the fact that they had shot down the UFO with the EMP cannon. They had worked effectively, and it crashed.
Okay.
And then what happened is that they toted that away into a secret little spot. He didn't disclose where, but he had discovered that there was an additional UFO that came later. He didn't specify the amount of time between, but he said another one of the same origin, it seemed, came to what they assumed was to investigate it, and they had shot that one down too. So there was 2.
Bad move.
Yeah. And he said, and I believe it was him that was quoting that the writing on the craft looked like some type of like very alien Arabic.
He called it hieroglyphs, and he said he only calls it that because he couldn't understand them.
Exactly. And I think someone else quoted it as like a alien type of Arabic or something like that.
Sounds right.
Which hieroglyphs Arabic? I mean, that's kind of along the same lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. But
I mean, if you think
sure,
about it.
we'll keep going.
One has the lines, dashes, swirls, and stuff, and the other one has
To the
pictures.
untrained eye, perhaps.
But what's interesting about it is there's a Mr. Chase Brandon, who's an ex-CIA agent, who had paralleled his story.
Okay.
He was involved in the investigation in it, but they were not actually involved together. They were actually investigating them separate times, but had then released information about it, describing the same thing, almost to not collaborate, but corroborate each other's stories, but to 2 different interviewers, 2 different times, and so it's supposed to be one of those things where it's like 2 sources, same story. Maybe something's going on there. But he was an ex-CIA agent who had access to the Roswell box, basically, at the CIA, and he had seen the pictures of the craft itself. Now, there's a ton of people who make claims of seeing UFOs. There's not a ton of official government individuals who make claims, because it's usually a ruining your career or discrediting yourself as a you've broken your secrecy.
Well, that's why
kind of
people
thing.
say they lie about it.
Exactly. But my big thing about a government agent of any kind talking about something that they had seen or witnessed or was part of, they don't have much to gain from it. In fact, if anything, they're going to be discredited by the government that they serve themselves. And also, there's going to be a ton of people who discredit just the general populace. The only people they would gain is the people that people assume are crazy anyways.
Right. Yeah.
So they're not getting money usually out of it. Like, not that there might be, but to my knowledge, there wouldn't be any way to really gain any
There
type of money.
can't be more money in making up a story about a UFO than there is in being successfully employed in the military.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not like an expert, but there just can't be.
Unless they had this big grand scheme of like releasing a book and then making tons of money off the book. But UFO is a great subject, but it's more of a niche market. It's not like you're going to become like a Harry Potter kind of like rich.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
Or even Lord of the Rings rich. Come on now. Like,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
you're not, to me, in a logical individual, you're not gaining enough to warrant lying about it. Now, some people say it's a mental thing. As they get older, they want the attention and things like that.
I've heard that.
But to me, there's a lot of ways to get attention besides lying about something that people believe and people don't believe.
Some of these people have really good stories about it too.
Yeah.
I remember hearing about one. He said he became a believer when the Roswell incident happened.
Ooh.
Because his father had something to do with the recovery of the debris at the site of the Roswell crash.
Okay.
Not on the ranch, but there was actually what they deemed to be an official crash site that was a couple miles down from there.
See, so that's an interesting
That's where the
part
actual
of the story
crash
too.
site was.
So what was on the ranch was just parts.
It
of
was parts and debris. They said,
Or
and
the
they actually
second craft.
they didn't actually get to the crash site until the day after they went out and checked out the debris that they found in the dude's field,
Interesting.
because word hadn't gotten out yet. Then they decided they should look around for other pieces, and they found what they deemed to be a crash site, and there was no pictures of that, and there was like no user witnesses from that, except for this kid at the time. He's old as heck now, but he claimed his dad was part of the team that recovered what was at the crash site, and he brought something home to him and showed it to him and told him about it and said it was part of a flying saucer. They had made a press release, so he was feeling like it was probably okay that he tells his kid about it.
Yeah.
And then he says that he went to Fort Wright, and then he came back a few days later or a week later, he didn't remember, and he told him not to talk about it and said that he was wrong and that it wasn't a UFO. But then they later talked about it again, is how the story goes, when his father was going to die soon, and he told him that it was in fact real, but there was nothing of it left. And he has since dedicated his life to UFOs and is a strong believer that it was a UFO, or a piece of a UFO that he had seen.
If I was some type of government or even your average person and I was told, shut the heck up, it's none of your concern, we're going to release this instead, it's not a UFO.
Right.
I'd be terrified of them finding out I showed my kid a part of it and that my kid's is going around saying it's a UFO.
Definitely. And exactly like
I'd tell them to be quiet too,
like
because
we were
I don't
saying,
want people to make me disappear.
You're not going to ruin your career and like your ability to take care of your family over this. It just wouldn't be worth it.
It's I mean, to some people it may have been worth it, but for people who are trying to earn, food on the table,
Exactly.
they'd keep their mouth shut.
Most people would.
At least for a while.
Most people would, yeah.
Yeah.
And he did for a while, and then he ended up telling him later that it was a UFO that they saw. That's how the story goes. He's big into UFOs now. He's like written books and stuff on Roswell. But he had similar claims that it had like some sort of light purple inscribings on it that he said were similar to hieroglyphs. Said you couldn't really see it unless you looked at it in the light, but he said it just looked like a normal piece of metal other than that.
I've heard a lot of stories. There's one that I'll probably talk a little bit about, mainly because I don't recall the name, and if I tried to research it the last couple days and I couldn't quite find it. but there was a gentleman who opened up his own aircraft manufacturing company.
Sure.
Shortly after Roswell, and I remember this because it was actually an official documentary that they did an interview with his son, I believe it was, and he had no prior training of any kind with aerospace or any kind of engineering or anything
aside from being on the base.
He was just literally like a private on the base with no degree, no training whatsoever. Several years after the Roswell thing, he just gets out of the Army and then opens up his own entire company that's still thriving today. We'll
look it up.
It's not Learjet. It's something along those, but I tried to like find that documentary again so I could refresh my memory on it. But I remember hearing about it, and if I get his name, I'll post it on there with a picture of like the company or something like that, so you guys can see which one I'm talking about.
That was interesting.
Yeah, it was an interesting
suspicious one. Even.
And that's I think down to the nitty gritty of conspiracies is you got facts, you got fiction, but the best of all, you have stories.
That's true.
Is you have people who lived in the moment and then either kept their mouth shut or openly talked about it. But it's always interesting because it's like, who do you really believe?
Yeah. So what do you believe?
I want to believe aliens. There's a lot of strong support for that. But at the same time, as many times as I want to believe it's aliens, one little fact always pops into my head. And it's,
sure,
if an alien is capable of traversing the universe to get to Earth, how is he so dumb to have crashed?
That's where I'm at. If they're coming from far enough away that we have not detected them, think of how far we're looking out into space on a daily basis. It's some people's full-time job to look out into space as far as possible. That's actually their job. And we have supposedly not found them yet. For them to be able to make it to Earth requires such precision.
Yeah, because you're looking at light years distance. You have to calculate where the planet's going to be
by the
time you get there.
Think like we do not have airplanes crash very often.
True.
Aside from that one recently. Did you see that? It was in the news. They were having to decommission a specific commercial airliner because of how often it's crashing.
Oh, yeah. You were telling me a little bit about that.
I don't know. Completely unrelated. But anyhow,
we'll talk about it.
We don't have many crashes here on Earth. These people or beings are precise enough to be able to travel to Earth from light years away, but they are not able to keep themselves suspended within our own like little atmosphere here, going at like regular speeds.
But the statement Lieutenant Colonel French made about the fact that we shot it down, that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable with believing an alien, because at the time we have the Las Vegas incident.
We were shooting things down at the time.
All the time.
We were.
Anything we didn't know what it was, we didn't know why it was, we would shoot it down and then figure it out afterwards.
Times were tense.
Yeah, I mean, we almost ended the world.
Right. Yeah, we did.
Like, maybe that's why he was here.
Sure.
Or it, or
it,
her,
whatever.
Or they
were here. Assuming.
I mean, that's not that far off from the world almost ending.
That's not far-fetched. No, not at all. We had dropped a warhead.
Yeah. We had Russia getting ready to move into Cuba, and we were about to start World War III.
If you are observing a planet from afar, and I'm assuming if they can see us, they're probably observing us because our planet's a bit of an anomaly.
It is. It is actually the exact description of an anomaly.
And like nuclear power is one of the strongest things that we've currently ever witnessed or conceived.
Not to mention we created it.
See that happening on the surface. There's probably going to be investigations afterwards, and
they see it on the surface, and they see us lighting them off like firecrackers all over.
Exactly. And right after that is when we had record amounts of UFO reports happening. Mm-hmm. That makes sense to me. That does make sense to me.
If you were observing.
Yeah.
If you were observing something, and then it did something that looked really reckless or really powerful,
right?
You'd want to get a little closer to be like, what's going on there?
Sure. Yeah, because I mean, it's not like we're a threat to something like that.
It doesn't.
But we are the closest thing to a threat. So
yeah, we could be pretty threatening if our advancements continue. But if they come to Earth and then stunt our growth,
right? Yeah, I don't know. But that part
by
of
systematically
me, I could
assassinating.
totally see it being aliens. In this particular case, because of its location, Area 51's not close, but it is happening.
Yeah.
And there is also the Roswell base where they're testing these aircrafts.
Which Area 51 wasn't a well-known base prior to UFO crashes.
Right. Yeah.
Like it
and
was
the
just,
Freedom of Information Act.
Yeah, and it was just assumed to be another Air Force base.
Right.
It wasn't until...
Well, and it was same thing with Roswell. They didn't know that that's what it was for until...
after.
Later, they had to tell people. Exactly.
But
were. Considering it happened right next to an air base where they are testing prototype airplanes, to me, this doesn't seem like aliens. This seems like prototype airplane gone down. They don't want people to see it. They hide prototypes all the time.
Oh, yeah.
It's scattered across this poor dude's ranch.
True.
He's got like the sheriff of some town poking at it.
He didn't
literally just like goes out and picks it up and takes it home.
He didn't even have a phone to contact the sheriff. He had to drive all the way into town to tell him.
So like the military then springs up and has to do something because they have the local sheriff taking chunks of this home in his briefcase.
Now,
that's how word gets out.
This is my only counter to your ideal. And it's not really to disprove you.
Bring it on.
It's my question in a sense. If it was a military plane or aircraft of some sort that they were obviously testing with, right? How would they not know it crashed when they lost communication with it? Why wouldn't they have immediately looked for it?
Maybe they were. They just haven't found it yet.
Because black boxes...
But they should have known where... I don't know when that started coming into play.
I think black boxes... Well, maybe not.
I think you're right. They would have had some...
They would have had some radar contact with it.
Considering maybe they just didn't think about it. It was like a prototype. It wasn't... Maybe it like...
How do you lose $1 million?
Maybe it wasn't supposed to go very far, and then like it got out of range of the dude's transmitter, and they were like, "Oh."
Well, I'm saying radar. Shit. You would have been tracking on radar at the time.
You're right. I know, and like that makes sense to me too. But also, the guy saw the debris, and then he called the military. Like something told him he was like, "Oh, this is from a plane." I mean, like
if you're a small town sheriff, like.
With an Air Force military?
Yeah. Well, I mean...
You call the news
at
first.
the time, the communism was a big fear. So, like, as soon as you run into something you suspect might be Russians, basically, you would contact the military because they'd come out and investigate for you.
That's fair. That's fair. I can see it.
My only argument to that is, like I said, if it was from the military, they would have known it crashed.
Well, the crash site was found later a couple miles away.
See, why was it found?
The military was at the crash site already.
Was it?
By the time, no one ever got pictures of it. The military were the only people that ever were at the crash site.
Oh, they picked it up. Well, then the farmer ended up with just pieces in his
I think that's what it is. I think the farmer had pieces of this airplane. He goes and tells
How does no one know when a giant airplane or something crashes?
Well, he said he heard a loud explosion. He goes and gets the sheriff. Sheriff comes out, kicks it a little bit.
Yeah,
with his spurred
I like
boots.
to.
I'm assuming he's got spurs on his boots.
Of course. I mean, it's a sheriff in 1947. He's got spurred boots.
And they were like on a ranch. I think they both had spurs.
No, the ranch guy didn't.
Yeah,
he's a working man. He didn't. He's
a working man who rides a horse. He's got spurs.
He doesn't have spurs.
And a cowboy hat.
He's a ranch man.
He looks just like Woody.
The sheriff had spurs.
The sheriff looked like Woody because he is Sheriff Woody.
Oh.
So Sheriff Woody goes out to the ranch and he's kicking these airplane parts of his spurred boots.
What if that's Pixar's
and then he goes back
to UFOs?
And he tells the military, he was like, "Hey, over here I found some weird pieces." They probably wouldn't have even looked into it unless they were already getting their airplane back that had crashed a couple miles away. And they were like, "Oh crap, we got to go get these parts out of this dude's yard."
How did these pieces end up over here?
He's telling the sheriff and stuff. He was like way out of town, probably on some back road.
Why would they then say it's a UFO?
Who?
The military.
You got a point. I don't know. Because then I don't know. Why would is that a better story than their own airplane crashing?
No, that's the whole point.
There had to be a lack of communication somewhere. Or just 100% someone was being honest because he was raised in the military to have morals, and honesty was one of those morals. Impossible. Impossible.
He was raised to believe in the government, believe in your morals, and be like all you can be, except that wasn't the motto at the time. But the point being is that he released what he actually thought it was, which was a UFO. And then his boss said,
maybe
stop it.
Stop it. Yeah. So I wonder, we'll have to look it up. What if by the time people knew about the crash site, that was after he had brought it to Fort George Wright? So this guy, the military guy, goes out and he gets the items from the guy's ranch. Mm-hmm. He decides this is a UFO. So what you're saying is... So he issues the press release, says this is a UFO. And then he takes it to Fort George Wright and he's like, dude, look what I found. It's a UFO. And he goes, dude, shut your mouth. There's people like 3 miles away picking up these parts of this airplane and you're telling people it's a UFO?
So you're saying it's a completely black force kind of military that was not attached to the base.
Higher level of military testing these airplanes, because not everybody knows.
Showed up
some
to collect
random ranch guy calls and says, hey, I've got some chunks of metal on my ranch. They don't send the top level guys. They send a dude out there in plain clothes.
Yeah, that's true.
A dude out there in plain clothes, and he's like, oh, this is it. This is a UFO. I'm telling everybody this is a UFO.
This is a UFO.
And then he puts the press release out, and it goes all the way to Fort George Wright to show this guy, because he probably tells him to bring it to him. And then they sit down in an office, and he's like, dude, you need to shut up. Because we accidentally crashed a prototype like a mile away, and you, worst case scenario, told everybody it was a UFO. What is
Best
wrong
case
with
scenario, you told it was a UFO. Yeah. Worst case scenario, they find out it's actually a secret EMP aircraft that shot down the UFO 3 years earlier.
And then they were like, what do we do now? We don't want to tell people that it was an airplane because it's some secret airplane they're testing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a UFO. Just to be clear, they say. This dude doesn't know what he's talking about. It wasn't a UFO.
You know his career was pretty much ended at that point.
Oh, I know. That had to be the end of it. And then they were like, but it was actually a weather balloon. So they were like, not a secret airplane, is a weather balloon. Definitely not a UFO. That dude doesn't work here anymore.
So your theory is that the team that was picking up the UFO is actually separate from the Walker Air Force.
That's how it would be. That is how it would be.
I get where you're going with this.
Maybe not separate from the Walker Air Force Base.
But a different unit.
They were a different unit. That
I think they were all 509, though.
They really didn't mingle with lower level people who would go out to the ranch to pick up chunks of metal.
Touche.
You know, that's how it would be. There would be separate levels like that. And if you were retrieving a plane that was confidential and a prototype, you'd be sending high level people out. And if you're retrieving chunks of metal, you'd be sending low level people out that are just going to pick up literal pieces of trash off this dude's lawn
with hieroglyphics on it.
Yeah, but I don't think the farmer looked that deep into it.
No.
He was probably just going into town to buy new spurs anyhow.
What really happened is they showed up. He was like, what's that metal doing on my farm? And he was like, well, I'm going to stash some of it on the porch and I'm going to sleep.
I'm going to bed because this doesn't concern me.
I get up at 5 a.m.
As you do.
As you do in the ranch. And then he just takes it into town.
He decided, since I'm going to town to get new spurs for my boots, I'll take this in and show the sheriff. Sheriff's board. For those
ranchers don't have spurs.
For those of you who don't know, Roswell, the population is less than 50,000 people. I think the 2017 consensus was like 40. It was like 47.
Yeah, a little less than 50,000.
It was something like that. It was even less back then.
Comparatively to like our city,
right?
Which is like 217,000.
For those of you who are here in the Pacific Northwest, Spokane, coming to you, not live. But
did we really want to tell them where we lived?
Yeah,
they're gonna track us down now.
Come and get me. Yes. But anyhow, significantly smaller than Spokane. It was a pretty small town at the time, so I'm thinking sheriff's board. This is cool.
Yeah.
He's like, I've always wanted to call the airbase. Maybe they'll even let me drive out there and look around or something. So then he calls them up, and the guy says, we'll take it from here. Sad sheriff.
Sad.
He doesn't...
Wait, I thought you went with the guy.
He went back with him to, there was 2 separate occasions. Sheriff goes back with the guy. Military guy goes out there. Yeah.
Okay.
Military guy is the one that actually goes out to the ranch and gets all the other parts. As they said, vacuumed the land.
All right. Here's my theory.
And then the military guy goes out there.
Here's my theory.
Okay. I'm ready.
Since you've given great detail on yours.
Yes.
My theory. Alien crashes. After we shoot it down. They can't figure out where it went because of his cloaking technology anyways.
Cloaking.
Or...
Okay, but
it's non-radar detectable.
Without even looking into that, if we shot something down, it's not like we have a beacon on it we can follow or something.
Exactly. So...
that clears.
Rancher finds pieces, reports it to the sheriff, reports it to the Air Force. Doesn't take it as a serious claim of any kind. He's just like, okay, well, no biggie. But then he gets notified through a memo. Hey, we shot down a UFO. Be aware and pay attention to local news and things like that. Then he goes,
out of the good of his heart.
Well, no. Like they want to find it.
Okay.
And so he gets notified, the 509.
Yeah.
This lieutenant gets notified through a official radio contact or memo saying, we have shot down a UFO. Do a search of the area, or if you hear any local news or chatter, go investigate.
Yeah.
Sheriff literally just called him earlier that day saying, hey, we've got this weird metal out there. It looks like a crash of something. He's like, oh crap, that sheriff just called me. So he goes out in plain clothes, not to draw attention from the public.
Kicks around in the dirt a little bit.
Kicks around in the dirt. Realizes, oh my God, I have a UFO. Or at least pieces of a UFO.
Pieces of it.
So he announces to journalists, takes pieces back to the Air Force Base, says, I've found a UFO. Then takes those pieces down to the guy who gave him the original memo saying, look for a UFO. And then he tells him, shut up. We are not trying to tell everyone about this because we don't know what it is.
That's fair.
We don't want the Russians to get it. We don't want the public to know we have it. We don't want to cause fear. So then he redacts his statement, says it's a weather balloon, while they're also taking the actual aircraft that he discovered at the same time. Because if you found pieces of an aircraft, you would investigate on where its original crash site was. So he would have found the original crash site and known that it had been scattered across, a 3/4 mile area.
Sure.
So he would have followed that back to the original crash point, knowing that he's only got a handful of pieces. If it's a UFO.
Heard an explosion in the night.
Exactly.
Shoots down the aliens.
He would have walked or drove that 3/4 miles, found the actual UFO crash, and been like, "Oh my God!"
Yeah.
So.
That's
and the
true.
rancher, he doesn't know. He didn't go with the military guy while he was in plain clothes to the original crash site. He only knows of what landed on his property. And to be honest, it's a small town. He doesn't really care. He just wants to get up at 5 a.m. and milk his cow.
So we both agree that the rancher doesn't care.
Yeah. I don't
Do
agree.
we agree he has spurs?
I don't agree he has spurs.
But the sheriff
definitely
at
has
least
spurs.
has spurs.
And I think, honestly, Pixar had something to do with UFOs because they have the rocket ship pizza delivery guy, and they named their sheriff Woody.
Okay.
Come on now.
I get it. So Sheriff Woody, we'll call him.
Yeah.
We should have called him that all along. So either way, we agree. Farmer didn't care. Sheriff had spurs.
Sheriff was a small town.
Government was lying.
Government was definitely lying.
And Pixar has something to do with it.
Pixar hinted towards it. One of the people that was stationed at the base works for Pixar. He was one of the founders of Pixar.
What a great place to end. That just wraps it up. It does.
I mean, I can't connect the dots for you guys any better than that.
We don't have anything else to say.
It's simple as A, B, C. Farmer says, hey, Sheriff. Sheriff says, hey, Air Force. Air Force says, shut up. We don't care. You're just a sheriff of a small town. Gets a memo later that day. Oh, crap. We care. Show me where it is.
We care now.
But don't draw too much attention to yourself because I'm coming in plain clothes so that nobody knows why I'm out here.
There we go. Close the notes. Phone turned off. Beer gone.
Aliens.
All right. Both of those are solid conclusions.
I mean,
Matt, the government's lying. Either way.
No matter how you look at it, it's 100%. The government was like, we're not going to tell the people.
They had to fudge something somewhere.
So if you take anything away from this, whether you believe in aliens or not, believe the government will lie to you when it feels its best interests are at heart.
They legally can. There's a reason they legally can.
Every day.
Because they do. Every day.
Yeah.
All right.
And then years later, they go, all right, well, we don't care enough about this. We'll give them part of the information.
Ran a couple minutes longer than normal. Tried to wrap it up. It didn't happen. There was too many talking. We knew this was going to happen because this is a classic. Yeah. Roswell's a classic. Like we said, we did a weird episode last time, top 5 proven conspiracies, which was fun, and we're going to go back and do it again.
We're going to keep
but
that
this time we had to go
one.
basic. We've been trying to get all these like newer, relevant
but sometimes a classic is just fun to talk about.
It is. There's more talking points. There's a lot more evidence. And we could talk about it all day, but we're not gonna.
There's a lot more theories and just good stories.
That's true. That's true. If you like these stories we talk about,
or the
come tell
information
us your
we give you.
stories. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. You can find us on Patreon, and you can find us on GoFundMe if you feel so inclined to donate to the cause and help pay for more beer, better beer, and pizza.
Our podcast sources are iTunes, Facebook. We put it Podbean on there.
We put it on Facebook, YouTube. Did you say
Spotify?
Podbean, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We're all over the place.
We are
pretty much. Castbox for mobile users. We're on Castbox now.
Yeah, if you Google search NC2 conspiracy podcast, it will bring up like the entire first page on Google is us.
Yes, if you look up NC2 Conspiracy Podcast, you can find all the places you can listen to us, all the places you could leave us ratings and subscribe to us, which would be great because that's where the money's at. So if you could go and subscribe to us, leave us a rating. I'm trying to get more 5-star ratings. We're getting some plays right now, and we're aiming for more.
Yeah, and then if you have anything to add to the Roswell incident,
we'd like to do another episode. Give us some input, and we'll make a whole nother episode about it.
We will make 100% another episode because we love talking about this kind of stuff.
That's true.
And honestly, if you have like sources or information that we just didn't know,
or if you think we're stupid or highly intelligent beings from another planet,
don't tell my mom.
Let us know, though. But let us know, though. We'll have to silence the...
Well.
But for real, come and talk to us. We'd like to talk to you.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks
definitely.
for listening to episode 7 of the NC Squared Conspiracy Podcast.
Not to end it like this, but like, share, and subscribe.
We told people we wouldn't say that. No.
I know.
Here we are saying it.
I wanted to do it just for funsies because we told them like the first episode we would be those kind of
we do it. Like, comment, and subscribe.
Oh my God.
Thanks, everybody.
No, but seriously, let us know how you're enjoying or disenjoying. Is that a word?
No.
I like it.
I've ended this like 3 times and you're still going.
Yeah, you're going to cut it out anyways.
I'm just going to end it anyhow. So